Most of us have been taught from an early age that hard work is the only true path to success. We grow up hearing phrases like, "the harder you work, the further you go," and for a long time, it feels true. There's a quiet satisfaction in measuring life by hours spent grinding, tasks completed, and sacrifices made. It creates a sense of control. If we simply try harder, surely the world will bend to our effort. But look around. People are working longer hours than ever before, yet so many still feel stuck. They reach milestones that society calls success and find emptiness waiting on the other side. The irony is not lost. Effort is visible, measurable, socially praised, but its results are rarely guaranteed. We cheer for the overachievers without noticing the countless hours that go unrecognized, unleveraged, and unproductive. Consider the office worker who stays late every night, believing sheer effort will earn a promotion, only to be passed over for someone who works strategically rather than exhaustively. Or the entrepreneur grinding endlessly on tasks that could be delegated, blind to the systems and networks that multiply impact. These examples are not failures of character or willpower, they are the natural outcome of confusing motion with progress. The effort fallacy is subtle because it feels virtuous. It makes struggle seem noble and exhaustion admirable. Yet, beneath that veneer, it quietly traps ambition and blinds us to smarter paths forward. By naming this trap, the first layer of freedom emerges, the recognition that effort alone is rarely enough and that curiosity about alternatives is where true growth begins. Even when we work tirelessly, there are forces at play that remain invisible, quietly shaping outcomes in ways most of us never notice. Organizational bottlenecks, outdated systems, and rigid hierarchies often render effort almost irrelevant. You may pour hours into a project, only to find decisions made above you nullify your work, not because you failed, but because the system operates according to unseen rules. Beyond structures, our own minds can be a barrier. Cognitive biases, our tendency to overestimate our control, underestimate complexity, or follow familiar patterns, mean we often apply effort in ways that feel productive but yield little real progress. We repeat strategies that worked before, ignoring the subtle shifts in context that render them ineffective. Effort, when misdirected, becomes not a bridge but a treadmill. Social dynamics add another layer. Influence, visibility, and connections often outweigh raw work. Two people can contribute equally in skill and energy, yet one will rise while the other remains stagnant, not due to merit, but because of relationships, timing, or invisible hierarchies. The rules are not always transparent, and trying harder rarely changes them. Consider the ambitious employee who continually exceeds targets yet never gets recognition, or the talented creator whose hours of content go unnoticed while a networked peer thrives. These examples highlight a subtle truth: effort alone is insufficient. The invisible barriers are not excuses, they are signals pointing towards smarter paths. By understanding these unseen forces, curiosity awakens. If effort can be trapped, what can actually break free? The mind begins to sense leverage waiting just beyond ordinary effort. Even when effort feels noble, it carries a quiet cost. Hours accumulate, energy depletes, and motivation frays, not in dramatic bursts, but in subtle, persistent erosion. There's a lingering tension, a low hum of dissatisfaction, as if something essential remains just out of reach. The work is visible, the effort undeniable, yet the rewards often feel muted or hollow. Burnout is rarely sudden. It creeps in through late nights, endless to-do lists, and the relentless push to prove oneself. Mental clarity begins to blur, decisions take longer, creativity diminishes, and even small victories feel muted. The paradox is stark: those who give the most can often feel they gain the least, not because they lack skill or willpower, but because effort alone is not enough to bend complex systems in their favor. Reflect for a moment on your own life. How many nights have you stayed up grinding, only to wake to the same problems, the same limitations, the same invisible ceilings? That quiet frustration is not failure, it is a signal. A signal that work, by itself, does not guarantee freedom. Something more subtle, more strategic, is required. And in that gap between effort and results lies the first hint of a smarter path, a doorway toward leverage and meaningful impact. Leverage is a word that sounds simple, yet its meaning often eludes us in daily life. At its core, leverage is the ability to amplify the impact of your actions, to make a small effort yield results far beyond what raw energy alone could achieve. Unlike effort, which is linear and predictable, leverage multiplies, creating disproportionate outcomes that feel almost effortless in comparison. Consider a writer who spends a few hours crafting a single article that reaches thousands through syndication or social sharing. The energy invested is small relative to the audience impacted. Or an investor who deploys a modest sum strategically, allowing time, interest, and networks to exponentially increase the result. In both cases, effort exists, but it is no longer the sole driver of outcome. The multiplier, the leverage, does the heavy lifting. Even in relationships, leverage exists. A single introduction or mentorship connection can open doors that years of effort alone might never reach. Knowledge, too, is a form of leverage. Learning a principle once and applying it repeatedly across situations multiplies influence without increasing effort. The pattern is clear: the smartest path rarely requires more hours or sweat, it requires insight, positioning, and strategic application. The contrast with pure effort is striking. While effort feels virtuous and visible, it often produces modest returns. Leverage, invisible at first glance, quietly magnifies action in ways that feel almost magical. For viewers reflecting on their own lives, the realization sparks curiosity. If some people achieve more with less, what choices or structures are they using? The mind begins to notice patterns, and the path from exhaustion to freedom starts to take shape. Leverage takes many forms, and understanding them is key to escaping the trap of effort alone. The first is capital. Money, when applied strategically, can multiply results far beyond its initial value. A small investment in the right opportunity can grow over time, producing outcomes that years of labor alone could never match. Even minimal capital, if deployed thoughtfully, creates a force that works quietly in the background, compounding while effort alone continues to hit invisible ceilings. Next is knowledge. Not all learning is equal. The difference lies in selective mastery, acquiring skills or insights that apply repeatedly across situations. One person may study dozens of topics superficially, barely improving outcomes, while another invests time in one high-leverage principle and reaps rewards across careers, projects, and decisions. Knowledge becomes a multiplier when applied strategically, turning small understanding into outsized influence. Relationships represent another subtle but powerful form of leverage. Connections, mentorships, and alliances often open doors effort alone cannot. A single introduction can bypass months of struggle, a well-placed collaboration can amplify output across networks. Influence is rarely earned by raw work, it is multiplied through carefully nurtured social channels. Finally, systems allow outcomes to scale without proportional effort. Whether it's an automated workflow, a replicable business process, or a structured routine, systems take energy once and let it operate continuously. The effort invested initially is never lost, it keeps returning value, quietly working behind the scenes. These 4 forms of leverage, capital, knowledge, relationships, and systems, demonstrate that freedom and impact rarely depend on motion alone. Observing these patterns encourages reflection. If some people achieve more with less visible effort, it is not luck, but strategic application of leverage. Understanding these forms is the first step toward intentionally redirecting energy where it multiplies rather than dissipates. Even when leverage exists all around us, it often goes unnoticed. Effort is visible. Hours logged, tasks completed, sweat and struggle, these are tangible, easy to admire. Leverage, by contrast, is subtle and largely invisible. A well-placed connection, a single insight, or a clever system rarely draws attention, even though its effects can far outweigh the hardest work. Our instincts, shaped by culture and habit, teach us to value what we can see, leaving leverage overlooked. Cognitive biases reinforce this blind spot. We equate motion with progress, believing that more activity must equal better results. We celebrate the grind, praising those who sacrifice endlessly, while the quiet multiplier, someone achieving more with less visible effort, is often ignored or misunderstood. This creates a paradox: the smarter path is invisible, the harder path is praised. Consider examples in everyday life: a colleague who achieves a promotion through strategic influence rather than extra hours, or a creator whose reach multiplies through one well-timed collaboration. Observing these patterns sparks reflection. Why does effort feel noble while leverage seems almost unfair? The answer is subtle but essential. Recognizing leverage challenges deeply ingrained assumptions, opening the mind to strategies that bypass the effort trap. Curiosity rises naturally, priming the viewer for practical application in the next chapter. In professional life, effort alone rarely determines outcomes. Hours spent at a desk, late nights, and constant busyness often produce only marginal gains. Yet some individuals consistently achieve more with less visible toil, not because they are luckier or smarter, but because they understand leverage. The difference lies in knowing where effort matters and where it can be multiplied strategically. Take the employee who delegates effectively. Instead of completing every task personally, they identify what truly requires their skill and pass the rest to capable colleagues or automated systems. The work gets done faster, with higher quality, and their own time is freed for high-impact decisions. This doesn't reduce effort, it redirects it, amplifying influence across the organization without adding exhaustion. Similarly, systems can act as invisible multipliers. A manager who structures recurring processes or workflows allows routine tasks to run without constant oversight. What once consumed hours now requires minimal input, producing consistent results. The initial investment of thought and planning compounds, freeing energy for critical thinking and creativity. Relationships, too, provide leverage. Knowing the right person to consult, collaborate with, or mentor can open doors that raw work alone cannot. A single well-timed conversation or strategic alliance can replace months of effort, creating outcomes that appear disproportionate to the work invested. These examples illustrate a subtle truth: the path to professional freedom is rarely paved with grind alone. Strategic application of energy through delegation, systems, and relationships produces results that feel amplified, almost effortless. For viewers reflecting on their own careers, the realization sparks both curiosity and relief. Success does not demand endless toil, but intelligent positioning and smart leverage. Knowledge can feel like a simple accumulation: hours spent reading, courses completed, or information memorized, but when applied strategically, it becomes a powerful form of leverage. The key is selective mastery, identifying the insights, skills, or principles that can be applied repeatedly, multiplying their impact across situations. Effort without direction yields only motion. Applied wisely, knowledge transforms small input into disproportionate outcomes. Consider an engineer who studies one high-leverage programming framework deeply rather than dozens superficially. That targeted expertise allows them to solve complex problems efficiently, mentor others, and create systems that persist beyond their individual contribution. Each hour invested compounds, producing results far beyond the linear effort of learning. Similarly, a strategist who identifies patterns in markets or human behavior can anticipate outcomes that others only react to, turning understanding into influence. Pattern recognition is another form of mental leverage. By observing trends, mistakes, and recurring structures, individuals can shortcut trial and error learning, applying lessons from one context to many. A single insight can ripple outward, shaping decisions, strategies, and outcomes with minimal repeated effort. The compounding effect of knowledge becomes evident over time. One carefully chosen principle, applied consistently, can outperform years of unfocused study or relentless work. For viewers, this distinction creates a subtle but powerful shift in perspective. Success is rarely about working harder, it is about applying what you know in ways that multiply impact. Curiosity rises naturally as they begin to notice areas in their own lives where small, intentional learning could yield massive returns, and where intellectual leverage might finally unlock the results that effort alone has failed to deliver. Relationships are often the most overlooked form of leverage, yet they quietly shape outcomes in ways effort alone cannot. A single connection, a mentor, ally, or collaborator, can open doors that years of grinding would never unlock. Influence, when multiplied through others, creates results that feel disproportionate to the work invested. Consider the entrepreneur who gains access to funding or opportunities through one well-timed introduction, or the professional whose career accelerates because they cultivated strategic alliances rather than simply working harder. In both cases, the effort is not absent, it is redirected, amplified by the people, networks, and structures around them. The work becomes smarter, not heavier. Mentorship illustrates leverage in action. Guidance from someone who has navigated challenges efficiently allows the mentee to avoid unnecessary struggle, shortcutting the learning curve. Alliances and collaboration distribute effort, creating outcomes far beyond what any individual could achieve alone. For viewers, this section offers subtle emotional satisfaction, the realization that freedom and influence are often invisible, quietly at work behind the scenes. It also primes curiosity for what comes next, understanding how all forms of leverage, from knowledge to relationships to systems, fit together into a coherent, hidden logic that explains why effort alone is never enough. Step back, and a pattern emerges across nearly every domain: finance, career, learning, and social influence. In each, effort alone rarely produces meaningful outcomes, while strategic application of leverage consistently multiplies results. The principles are subtle, almost invisible, yet remarkably consistent. Understanding these patterns reveals why some people achieve disproportionate success while others exhaust themselves chasing linear progress. In finance, compounding is leverage in action. A modest investment, applied consistently over time, grows far beyond what repeated effort, working extra hours for a paycheck, could ever produce. In careers, influence flows not from sheer busyness, but from strategic positioning, mentorship, and relationships that amplify one's actions. Learning is similar. Mastering key principles allows application across countless scenarios, multiplying impact without increasing labor. Even in social systems, the pattern repeats. Those who recognize and navigate hierarchies, networks, and connections gain outcomes that raw effort cannot unlock. They act as though they are playing a different game, one where motion alone matters less than insight, timing, and leverage. The common thread is the multiplicative effect. Small, intelligent inputs generate outsized outputs. Effort alone is linear, predictable, and limited. Leverage transforms energy into results that feel exponential. For viewers, this realization provides a mental shift, clarity about unseen forces they have been navigating unknowingly. Subtle curiosity awakens. If these patterns are universal, where in their own life might they identify similar leverage opportunities? Observing these recurring structures primes reflection, encouraging deliberate action and an awareness that freedom is built on understanding, not merely doing. Freedom has long been framed as the result of relentless effort, the belief that if we push hard enough, sacrifice enough, and endure enough, liberation will arrive. Yet the stories and patterns we've explored reveal a subtler truth. Freedom is not a product of motion, but of insight, positioning, and strategic application. It emerges when effort is multiplied rather than merely expended, when choices are guided by leverage rather than exhaustion. Consider the professional who escapes the treadmill not by working longer, but by structuring systems, nurturing key relationships, and focusing on high-leverage knowledge. Or the entrepreneur who amplifies impact through networks, mentorship, and targeted action, achieving far more with less visible toil. Their liberation is quiet, almost invisible, yet profoundly real. It is the result of understanding how energy flows, where influence resides, and which small actions yield disproportionate outcomes. This understanding reframes our approach to work, learning, and life itself. The long hours, the constant striving, the grind, these are not inherently wrong, but they are insufficient without strategy. Freedom, therefore, is an architecture, not a reward. It is built by identifying the multipliers, aligning effort with leverage, and cultivating patience as outcomes compound. For viewers, this realization is both validating and empowering. It dissolves the frustration of past toil while opening a path toward intentional action. Curiosity shifts into clarity. The invisible logic of leverage is no longer a distant concept but a framework for navigating life with autonomy and calm authority. True freedom is not earned by endless struggle, it is chosen through understanding, multiplied through strategy, and sustained by deliberate reflection.